Welcome to The Key to Home, a heartwarming tale of love and belonging. Join Camila Santos, a young housekeeper with a troubled past, as she arrives at the mysterious Monte Azul farm and meets its enigmatic owner, Arthur Montgomery. Their unexpected connection will challenge social barriers and family expectations, proving that sometimes love is worth risking everything for. Before we begin this story, comment below where you're watching from. The old bus rattled down the dusty country road, carrying just a handful of passengers. Among them was Camila Santos, a slim young woman with tired eyes clutching a worn suitcase to her chest. As the bus driver called out, "Monte Azul Farm," she took a deep breath and stood up. "Is this the right stop for the farm?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The driver nodded. "Big white house up that road, can't miss it." Camila stepped off the bus into the scorching heat. At 24, she carried the weight of someone twice her age. Orphaned at 16 when her parents died in a car accident, she'd spent years working in other people's homes, cleaning their messes and enduring their judgment. Her last job had ended in tears and accusations. "I know you took my diamond earrings." Mrs. Hawkins had screamed, her face red with anger. "You cleaning girls are all the same." Camila had not taken anything. She never did. But without references and with nowhere to go, the newspaper ad for Monte Azul Farm had seemed like a gift from heaven. Live-in housekeeper needed. Room and board included. References optional. As she walked up the long driveway, Camila's expectations were simple. A small room, hard work, and to be left alone. The tall gates of the farm looked intimidating, but she pushed forward. A middle-aged woman waited by the entrance. "You must be Camila," the woman said, her face unsmiling. "I'm Martha, the cook. I've been told to show you around." "Thank you for meeting me," Camila replied politely. Martha looked her up and down. "Follow me. It's a big place and there's only a few of us left working here." As they walked toward the main house, Camila couldn't help but notice how beautiful yet neglected everything looked. The gardens were overgrown and the fountains were dry. The sprawling white house itself seemed to be sleeping under the afternoon sun. "What happened here?" Camila asked, unable to contain her curiosity. Martha's lips tightened. "Mrs. Montgomery died last year. Cancer. She was a strict woman, but fair. Since then, everything's gone downhill. Her son Arthur rarely comes home. He's the only heir, but he's been traveling abroad, running away if you ask me." They entered the house through a side entrance. Inside, the air was cool but stale. Sheets covered most of the furniture, and dust gathered in corners. "Your room is upstairs next to mine," Martha continued. "Meals are at 7, noon, and 6. Your duties include cleaning all rooms except Mr. Montgomery's private quarters, doing laundry, and helping me with dinner service if needed." Camila nodded, taking mental notes. "Is there anyone else working here?" "Just old Joe, who takes care of the grounds when his arthritis isn't acting up, and Manuel, who helps with the few animals we have left," Martha replied. "There used to be 20 staff members when Mrs. Montgomery was alive." As they climbed the stairs, Camila noticed an old golden retriever lying at the top landing. The dog looked up with cloudy eyes but didn't move. "That's Daisy," Martha said. "She's as old as dirt. Mrs. Montgomery loved that dog. No one expects her to last much longer." Camila knelt down and gently stroked the dog's head. Daisy's tail thumped weakly against the floor. "Hello, sweet girl," Camila whispered. Martha snorted. "Don't get attached. Come on, let me show you your room." The room was small but clean, with a simple bed, a wooden dresser, and a window overlooking the gardens. It was more than Camila had expected. "Thank you," she said, placing her suitcase on the bed. "When will I meet Mr. Montgomery?" Martha shrugged. "Who knows? He comes and goes like a ghost. Sometimes stays for a day, sometimes a month. He's been gone for 6 weeks now." After Martha left, Camila unpacked her few belongings. From her suitcase, she took out a small framed photo of her parents and placed it on the nightstand. Then she did what she always did in a new place. She made the bed with hospital corners and arranged her toiletries in perfectly straight lines. Order was the only thing she could control in her life. That night, after a quiet dinner with Martha in the kitchen, Camila couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, too big. She got up and decided to explore. Taking a small flashlight from her bag, she walked down the hall and into the main part of the house. The living room was enormous, with sheet-covered furniture that looked like ghosts in the dim light. Dust covered every surface, but rather than feeling intimidated, Camila felt something different: purpose. The next morning, she woke early and immediately started cleaning. She pulled sheets off furniture, opened windows to let fresh air in, and attacked the dust with determination. Martha watched her with surprise. "You don't have to do all this at once, you know," she said. "The master isn't even here." But Camila couldn't stop. She worked from dawn until dusk, cleaning one room after another. She found peace in the repetitive motions, in seeing immediate results. By the end of the first week, she had cleaned most of the ground floor. She had also started feeding Daisy special food she prepared herself, mixing in ground medicine with soft meat to help with the dog's joints. To everyone's surprise, the old dog began to follow Camila around, her steps little less stiff each day. One evening, while wandering through the garden, Camila discovered an abandoned greenhouse. Inside were dried plants and empty pots. The next day she asked Joe where she could find seeds. "Seeds for what?" the old groundskeeper asked, puzzled. "I want to plant some flowers," she replied. "Maybe some herbs, too." Joe scratched his head. "There's probably some in the garden shed. Mrs. Montgomery used to love gardening before she got sick." With seeds in hand, Camila started bringing the greenhouse back to life. She planted rows of marigolds, petunias, and herbs. She watered them daily, talking to them softly as if they were old friends. Martha thought she was crazy. "What's the point of all this work? No one's here to see it." But Camila didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt like she was building something instead of just surviving. The house began to respond to her care. Floors gleamed, windows sparkled, and fresh flowers appeared in vases. She also began leaving small notes around the house, quotes of hope and encouragement she remembered from her mother. One in the kitchen read, "Today is a new beginning." Another by the front door said, "Welcome home." She didn't know why she was doing this. Perhaps it was for herself, to make this huge empty place feel less lonely. Or maybe it was for the mysterious owner who, according to Martha, had lost his way. 3 weeks after Camilla's arrival, as she was having breakfast in the kitchen, the sound of a car crunching on the gravel driveway broke the morning silence. Daisy, who had been sleeping at her feet, suddenly lifted her head and barked, a sound Camila had never heard from the old dog. Martha rushed to the window. "It's him," she said, her voice tight with tension. "Mr. Montgomery is back." Camilla's heart started racing. She quickly smoothed her apron and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Through the window, she saw a tall man stepping out of an expensive black car. He wore casual clothes, jeans and a button-down shirt, but carried himself with unmistakable confidence. "Should I greet him?" Camila asked nervously. "No," Martha replied. "He usually goes straight to his study. Just stay out of his way." But as Arthur Montgomery walked toward the house, something unexpected happened. Daisy, who had been moving slowly for years, suddenly bolted past Camila and out the side door, barking excitedly. The man stopped in his tracks. His stern face softened as the old dog approached him, her tail wagging furiously. "Daisy," he said in disbelief, kneeling down to pet her. "What happened to you, old girl?" Camila watched from the doorway, unable to move. Martha stood beside her, equally stunned. "She hasn't moved like that in over a year," Martha whispered. Arthur looked up and noticed them, his eyes dark and intense, fixed on Camila. Something passed between them, a moment of recognition that made no sense since they'd never met. "You must be the new housekeeper," he said, standing up. Camila nodded, suddenly finding it hard to speak. "Yes, sir. Camila Santos. I see you've made friends with Daisy," he continued, his voice deep and measured. "She's a sweet dog," Camila replied softly. "I've been giving her some special food for her joints." Arthur nodded, studying her face. There was something guarded in his expression, as if he was used to keeping people at a distance. "The house looks different," he said, glancing around. "Cleaner." "Camilla's been working non-stop," Martha chimed in, "like a woman possessed." A ghost of a smile touched Arthur's lips. "Well, thank you for that. I'll be in my study if anyone needs me." As he walked away, Daisy loyally following him. Camila released the breath she didn't know she was holding. There was something about Arthur Montgomery that unsettled her, not in a frightening way, but in a way that made her feel seen for the first time in years. That evening, Martha informed Camila that Mr. Montgomery would take dinner in the dining room. He usually eats alone in his study, Martha explained while preparing a roast chicken. But tonight he wants the dining room. Strange. Camila had spent the afternoon making sure the dining room was perfect, polishing silver that hadn't been used in months, arranging fresh flowers from the greenhouse, and lighting candles to create a warm atmosphere. When Martha called her to help serve dinner, Camila was surprised to find two place settings at the table. "Is someone joining Mr. Montgomery?" she asked. Martha looked equally confused. "Not that I know of." When Arthur entered the room, he seemed different. He had showered and changed into a clean shirt. He looked at the beautifully set table, the freshly cut flowers, and the crystal, glasses gleaming in the candlelight. "Will your guest be arriving soon, sir?" Camila asked politely. Arthur met her eyes. "I was hoping you would join me for dinner, Camila." She froze, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "Me?" "Yes," he said. "I'd like to know more about the person who's brought my mother's house back to life." Martha nearly dropped the dish she was carrying. In all her years working for the Montgomery family, she had never seen an employer invite staff to dine with them. I couldn't possibly," Camila stammered. "Please," Arthur said, his voice softer than before. "Just dinner, as a thank you." Hesitantly, Camila sat down across from him. Martha served them both before retreating to the kitchen, shooting Camila a look that said, "Be careful." They ate in silence for several minutes. Camila could feel Arthur watching her, and she kept her eyes on her plate. "The house feels different," he finally said. "Not just cleaner. It feels alive." Camila looked up. "It's a beautiful home." "It's a beautiful building," he corrected. "It's never been much of a home. My mother ran it like a museum." "I noticed the greenhouse," Camila said. "I hope you don't mind that I planted some flowers." "I saw them," he nodded. "The marigolds are starting to bloom." Another silence fell between them, but this one felt less awkward. Daisy lay at Arthur's feet, occasionally lifting her head to glance at Camila. "Why did you come here?" Arthur asked suddenly. Most young women wouldn't choose to be isolated on a farm like this. Camila considered her answer carefully. "I needed a fresh start. Running away from something?" She met his gaze. "Maybe, just like you." Arthur's eyebrows shot up, and Camila immediately regretted her words. "I'm sorry, that was inappropriate." To her surprise, he smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "No, you're right. I have been running away. From this house, from memories." He looked around the dining room. "From ghosts." When they finished eating, Camila stood to clear the plates. "Leave them," Arthur said. "Martha can get them in the morning." He walked her to the staircase that led to the staff quarters. Daisy followed them, looking back and forth between her two favorite people. "Thank you for dinner," Camila said politely. Arthur nodded, looking at her with an intensity that made her heartbeat quicken. Then, almost as if he couldn't help himself, he said, "This house has never been a home, but with you here, maybe it could be." Before Camila could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving her standing at the foot of the stairs, wondering if she had imagined the vulnerability in his voice. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Camila tried to make sense of the strange connection she felt with Arthur Montgomery. She had spent years being invisible in other people's homes, and now suddenly she felt seen, really seen, by someone who seemed as lost as she was. It frightened her, but for the first time in years, it also gave her hope. The days that followed, their dinner were filled with a strange tension. Arthur spent most of his time in his study, only emerging for meals or to take Daisy for short walks around the property. But Camila could feel his presence everywhere in the house like a shadow, just out of sight. Sometimes she would enter a room to clean and find evidence that he had been there, an empty coffee cup, an open book, or simply the lingering scent of his cologne. Other times she would feel his eyes on her as she worked in the garden, only to look up and catch him watching her from a window. One morning, as Camila was arranging fresh flowers in the entrance hall, Arthur appeared at the bottom of the staircase. He was dressed casually in jeans and a light sweater, his dark hair slightly tousled. "Good morning," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Good morning, Mr. Montgomery," she replied, suddenly conscious of her simple work dress and the wisps of hair escaping from her ponytail. "Please call me Arthur," he said, stepping closer to examine the bouquet she was arranging. "These are from the greenhouse," Camila nodded. "Yes, they're coming along nicely now. The soil here is good." "My mother used to spend hours in that greenhouse," Arthur said, a distant look in his eyes. "After she got sick, everything died. I couldn't bring myself to go in there." "I'm sorry," Camila said softly. "I should have asked before using it." Arthur shook his head. "No, I'm glad you did. It should be used, not left to collect dust like everything else around here." He hesitated. "Would you show me what you've done with it?" Surprised by his request, Camila led him to the greenhouse. The morning sun streamed through the glass panels, illuminating rows of flowers and herbs. Many were still small, but the splashes of color were undeniable signs of life returning. "It's not much yet," she said nervously as they entered. Arthur walked slowly between the rows, touching a leaf here, a petal there. "It's more than I expected," he said finally. "It's hopeful." Their eyes met, and for a moment, Camila saw something unexpected in his gaze, a vulnerability that matched her own. She quickly looked away, focusing on a pot of basil that needed watering. "I thought we could use fresh herbs in the kitchen," she explained. "Martha wasn't sure at first, but now she uses them for everything." Arthur smiled. "I noticed dinner has improved considerably since you arrived." "That's all Martha's doing. I just help a little." "You're being modest," he said, then added more. "Seriously, you've changed this place in ways I didn't think possible." Unsure how to respond to his praise, Camila changed the subject. "Will you be staying long this time?" A shadow crossed his face. "I'm not sure. I have business matters to attend to, but—" He trailed off, looking around the greenhouse. "This place has felt different since I returned. Less haunted." "Haunted?" Camila asked. "By memories," he clarified. "Good and bad ones." Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of a car coming up the driveway. Arthur's expression immediately hardened. "That would be Gregory Walsh, my mother's lawyer," he said, his voice losing its warmth. "Excuse me." Camila watched through the greenhouse windows as Arthur greeted a tall, thin man in an expensive suit. There was obvious tension between them, evident in their stiff handshake and terse expressions. The two men disappeared into the house, leaving Camila wondering about this sudden change in Arthur's demeanor. Later that afternoon, while dusting the library shelves, Camila overheard raised voices coming from Arthur's study next door. She tried not to listen, but the words carried clearly through the old walls. "Your mother's wishes were very specific, Arthur," the lawyer was saying. "The foundation expects you to take a more active role in managing the estate." "I'm well aware of my mother's wishes," Arthur replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. "But that doesn't mean I have to live my life according to her plans. Nevertheless, decisions need to be made. The board is concerned about your extended absences and the reduction in staff. And now I hear you've hired someone new without proper vetting." Camila froze, realizing they were talking about her. "My staff decisions are not the board's concern," Arthur said firmly. "They are when it involves someone with a questionable background," Walsh countered. "Do you even know who this woman is? Where she came from, her references?" "Camila has proven herself more than capable." Arthur's voice had a dangerous edge now. "Capable of what exactly? Worming her way into your home? Your sympathies?" There was a pause. "Your mother would never have allowed someone like her to—" "Enough!" Arthur's shout was followed by the sound of something hitting a wall. "My mother is gone, Gregory. And while I respect her memory, I will run this house as I see fit." Camila backed away from the wall, her heart racing. She hurried out of the library, not wanting to hear any more. The lawyer's words echoed in her mind. Someone with a questionable background. He had been investigating her. Did he know about the false accusations at her last job? About how she had been forced to leave without references? She retreated to the safety of the kitchen, where Martha was preparing dinner. The older woman took one look at Camilla's pale face and asked, "What's wrong, girl? You look like you've seen a ghost." Mr. Walsh is here, Camila said simply. Martha's face soured. That man, always stirring up trouble. Don't let him bother you. He was talking about me, about my background. Martha put down her knife and wiped her hands on her apron. Listen to me, Camila. Gregory Walsh has been trying to control this family for years. He and Mrs. Montgomery were thick as thieves, planning Arthur's future like he was a chess piece instead of a person. What do you mean? Martha lowered her voice. Mrs. Montgomery had very specific ideas about what Arthur should do with his life, who he should marry, how he should run the business. She left everything in a trust with all sorts of conditions. Walsh is the executor, so he has power over Arthur in some ways. This information gave Camila a new perspective on Arthur's behavior, his long absences, his resistance to being at the farm, and the sadness that seemed to follow him like a shadow. Dinner that evening was a tense affair. Gregory Walsh was invited to join them in the dining room, and Camila served the meal in silence, feeling his critical eyes on her every move. He was polite enough on the surface, but there was something calculating in his gaze that made her uncomfortable. The house looks much improved, Arthur, Walsh commented as he sipped his wine. Though I'm surprised you've decided to reopen it fully. Is this a sign you're finally accepting your mother's wishes? Arthur's jaw tightened. I'm simply living in my own home, Gregory. Of course, Walsh said smoothly. And the greenhouse? Helen would be pleased to see it functioning again. He turned to Camila as she served the main course. Do you have experience in gardening, Miss Santos? The direct question caught her off guard. Just what I learned from my mother, sir. And where was that? I don't believe Arthur mentioned where you worked previously. Camila felt her cheeks burn. Various homes in the city, sir. I see, Walsh said, his tone suggesting he saw much more than she wanted him to. And did you leave your last position with good references? That's enough, Gregory, Arthur cut in sharply. Camilla's employment history is none of your concern. Walsh raised an eyebrow, but backed down. The rest of the meal continued in uncomfortable silence, broken only by Walsh's occasional comments about family business matters that clearly annoyed Arthur. After dinner, Camila escaped to her room as quickly as possible. She sat on the edge of her bed, hands trembling slightly. She had known this job was too good to be true. Now this lawyer was digging into her past, and soon Arthur would know about the accusations of theft, about how she had left her last job. Under a cloud of suspicion, a soft knock on her door startled her. When she opened it, she was shocked to find Arthur standing there, looking uncomfortable in the narrow staff hallway. May I speak with you? He asked quietly. Camila nodded, stepping back to let him enter. Her small room suddenly felt even smaller, with his tall presence filling it. Arthur glanced around, taking in her few possessions and the neatly made bed. I wanted to apologize for Walsh's behavior at dinner, he said. He had no right to question you like that. It's all right, Camila said, though they both knew it wasn't. Arthur ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of frustration. No, it's not. Walsh believes he has authority over every aspect of this estate, including who I hire. He mentioned your mother's wishes. My mother's wishes have controlled my life for 30 years, Arthur said bitterly. Even from the grave, she's still pulling the strings. Seeing his pain, Camila instinctively reached out, touching his arm gently. I'm sorry. Arthur looked down at her hand on his arm, then into her eyes. Something shifted in his expression, a softening. Why did you really come here, Camila? He asked, his voice low. To this empty house in the middle of nowhere? She considered lying, giving him the same vague answers she'd given Martha. But looking into his eyes, she found herself wanting to tell the truth. I needed to disappear, she admitted. My last employer accused me of stealing her diamond earrings. I didn't take them, but she threatened to call the police. I left that night with just what I could carry. She waited for his reaction. Judgment, disbelief, or worse, pity. Instead, Arthur simply nodded. I know what it's like to be judged unfairly, he said, to have people look at you and see only what they want to see. His understanding brought tears to her eyes, which she quickly blinked away. Mr. Walsh seems concerned about my influence here. Gregory is concerned about anything that threatens his control, Arthur replied, "including the changes you've made." "I can be more discreet with my work," Camilla offered. "Or if you prefer, I could leave." "No," Arthur interrupted, more forcefully than either of them expected. More softly, he added, "No, I don't want you to leave or to change anything. The house feels right with you here." They stood in silence for a moment, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Arthur was so close that Camilla could see the faint stubble on his jaw, smell the subtle scent of his cologne. "I should go," he said finally, taking a step back. "Walsh is staying overnight. We have more business to discuss tomorrow." Camilla nodded, suddenly conscious of how inappropriate it would seem for him to be in her room. "Good night, Arthur." "Good night, Camilla," he replied, his eyes lingering on her face before he turned and left. The next morning, Camilla was weeding the flower beds when she noticed Arthur and Walsh walking the property. Their conversation appeared heated, with Walsh gesturing emphatically, while Arthur stood with his arms crossed. Eventually, they returned to the house, and an hour later, Walsh's car disappeared down the driveway. That afternoon, while Camilla was cleaning the bookshelves in the study, she discovered a leather-bound journal hidden behind a row of books. The initials H.M. Bice were embossed on the cover, Helen Montgomery, Arthur's mother. Curiosity overcame her better judgment, and she opened it to a random page. "Arthur continues to resist my plans for his future," the elegant handwriting read. "He fails to understand the responsibility that comes with our name and fortune. The girl he's seeing is completely unsuitable, no connections, no understanding of our world. I've made it clear in my will that if he wants his inheritance, he must honor the family legacy as I see fit." Camilla quickly closed the journal, feeling like an intruder. She carefully replaced it behind the books, but her mind was racing. This explained so much about Arthur's relationship with his mother and his reluctance to embrace his role as heir to the Montgomery estate. Just as she finished arranging the books, Arthur entered the study. He paused when he saw her, something unreadable crossing his face. "Camilla," he said, "I was looking for you." "I was just finishing the shelves," she replied, hoping he couldn't tell she'd been reading his mother's journal. "Walsh is gone," Arthur said, sitting down heavily in the leather chair behind the desk. "Finally. Did your meeting go well?" she asked cautiously. He gave a humorless laugh. "As well as my meetings with Gregory ever go. He wants me to host a dinner party next weekend. Board members, family friends, all the people my mother thought were important." He looked up at her. "I'd like you to help organize it." Camilla blinked in surprise. "Me? But Martha would know better how—" "Martha can handle the food," Arthur interrupted. "But I want you to arrange everything else. The flowers, the setting, the him feeling of it all." He gestured vaguely. "You've brought something to this house that it's been missing for a long time. I want others to see it too." His confidence in her was both flattering and terrifying. "I've never organized anything like that before." "I trust you," he said simply. "And I'd like you to attend as well, not as staff, but as my guest." Camilla stared at him, sure she had misheard. "Your guest? But that wouldn't be proper. People will talk." "Let them talk," Arthur said, a hint of defiance in his voice. "It's time I stopped living by other people's rules." Before she could respond, Martha appeared at the door looking flustered. "Mr. Montgomery, Joe says there's a problem with the north fence. Something about cattle from the neighboring farm getting through." Arthur sighed and stood up. "We'll talk more about this later," he said to Camilla, then followed Martha out. Left alone in the study, Camilla's eyes were drawn back to the shelf where Helen Montgomery's journal was hidden. Against her better judgment, she took it out again and flipped through more pages. What she found confirmed her suspicions: detailed plans for Arthur's life, judgments about his choices, and strict conditions for his inheritance. One passage in particular caught her attention. "Arthur must marry someone appropriate to our station, preferably Caroline Winters or another girl from one of the founding families. Only then will he have full access to his inheritance. I've made this clear to Gregory, who will enforce my wishes after I'm gone." Camilla closed the journal, her hands trembling slightly. No wonder Arthur felt trapped. His own mother had tried to control every aspect of his life, even his choice of who to love. The knowledge weighed heavily on her as she went about her duties for the rest of the day. When evening came, she found herself walking in the garden, trying to clear her mind. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Arthur's voice came from behind her. Camila turned to find him standing a few feet away, Daisy at his side. "Yes, it is. I used to hate sunsets," he said, moving to stand beside her. "They reminded me that another day was ending and nothing had changed." "And now?" she asked. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the golden light. "Now I'm starting to see them differently, as the promise of a new beginning tomorrow." His words echoed the note she had left in the kitchen, her first week here. Today is a new beginning. Had he seen it? Had it meant something to him? "About the dinner party," Arthur continued. "I understand if you're uncomfortable attending as my guest, but I meant what I said. I want you there, Camila, not serving drinks or staying in the background. I want you beside me." The intensity in his eyes made her heart race. "Why?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Arthur took a step closer. "Because when I'm with you, I feel like myself. Not the heir to the Montgomery fortune, not my mother's disappointment, just me." The vulnerability in his voice touched something deep inside her. For years, Camila had kept her walls up, protecting herself from more hurt and disappointment. But standing here with Arthur, those walls were beginning to crumble. "I'll be there," she said softly, "but I have nothing to wear to something like that." Arthur smiled, relief evident on his face. "We can fix that. Tomorrow, I'll have Martha drive you into town. Get whatever you need. I couldn't possibly—" "Please," he said, taking her hand, "let me do this for you." The feel of his hand around hers sent warmth spreading through her body. Slowly, she nodded. As they walked back to the house together, Daisy trotting ahead of them, Camila felt a strange mix of hope and fear. She was drawn to Arthur in a way she had never experienced before, but she also knew the barriers between them were far greater than just employer and employee. There was his family legacy, the conditions of his inheritance, and the whispers that would surely follow if anyone suspected his feelings for someone like her. And then there was Gregory Walsh, who clearly saw her as a threat to whatever plans had been set in motion long before she arrived at Monte Azul Farm. That night, lying in bed, Camila remembered the words from Helen Montgomery's journal. Arthur was expected to marry someone from his own social circle, someone like Caroline Winters, whoever she was, not a housekeeper with a questionable past and no family name. Yet the way Arthur had looked at her in the garden, the feel of his hand holding hers, gave her a dangerous hope. For the first time in years, Camila allowed herself to dream of something more than just survival. She dreamed of belonging, of being chosen, of building a real home with someone who saw her, truly saw her, for who she was. But as she drifted off to sleep, a nagging voice in the back of her mind warned her, dreams like these weren't meant for people like her, and if she dared to reach for this happiness, she might end up losing everything. Again. The next morning, Martha's expression was a mixture of disapproval and curiosity when Arthur instructed her to take Camila into town for shopping. "Mr. Montgomery wants you to buy a dress?" she repeated, eyebrows raised. "For the dinner party?" "He asked me to attend," Camila explained, feeling her cheeks warm under Martha's scrutiny. "As a guest." Martha's lips thinned. "I've worked for the Montgomery family for 25 years, and I've never seen anything like this." She grabbed her car keys from the hook by the door. "Well, come on then. No sense arguing with the boss." The drive into town was mostly silent, with Martha occasionally glancing at Camila, as if trying to solve a puzzle. Finally, as they approached the main street lined with shops, Martha spoke. "Be careful, girl," she said, her voice gentler than usual. "Arthur is a good man, but there's a lot of history you don't understand." "What do you mean?" Camila asked. Martha sighed. "His mother did a number on him. Controlled everything, his education, his friends, even who he dated. The last girl he really cared about. Well, Helen made sure that ended quickly." "How?" "Financial pressure, social isolation, the works. The poor girl wasn't from money, you see. Helen told her straight to her face that Arthur would lose everything if he stayed with her. Martha parked the car in front of a row of boutiques. The girl left town the next day. Arthur never knew why. The information settled heavily in Camilla's stomach. It matched what she had read in Helen's journal. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I see the way he looks at you," Martha replied simply. "And the way you look at him. Just don't expect a fairy tale, that's all." Inside the boutique, Camila felt immediately out of place among the expensive dresses and judgmental stares from the saleswomen. She had never shopped in a store like this before, where single items cost more than her entire wardrobe. "May I help you?" asked a perfectly coiffed saleswoman, her eyes quickly assessing Camilla's simple clothes. "She needs a dress for a dinner party at the Montgomery estate," Martha said before Camilla could answer. Arthur Montgomery's instructions. The mention of Arthur's name worked magic. Suddenly the saleswoman was all smiles and helpfulness, ushering Camilla toward a fitting room and bringing dress after dress for her to try on. After several attempts, Camilla emerged in a deep blue silk dress that fell just below her knees. It was simpler than the others, with clean lines and minimal embellishment. But when she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. "That's the one," Martha said decisively. "Arthur always said his mother wore too many frills and feathers. He'll appreciate the simplicity." The saleswoman agreed, adding earrings and shoes to complete the look. When it came time to pay, Camilla was shocked at the total. "I can't possibly," she began. "Arthur was very clear," Martha interrupted, handing over a credit card. "Whatever. You need no questions asked." As they drove back to the farm, the shopping bags carefully placed in the back seat, Camilla couldn't shake a sense of unreality. Just weeks ago, she had arrived with nothing but a worn suitcase and a desperate need for work. Now she was preparing to attend a dinner party as the guest of one of the wealthiest men in the county. "What are they like?" she asked suddenly. "The people who will be at the party," Martha snorted. "Rich, entitled, and nosy. They've been gossiping about Arthur for years. Why he's not married, why he travels so much, who will inherit the Montgomery fortune if he never has children." She glanced at Camilla. "And they'll be watching you like hawks, trying to figure out what you are to him." "I'm not sure I know myself," Camilla admitted quietly. "Well, whatever you are, just be prepared. These people smile to your face while they're sharpening their knives." Back at the farm, Camilla found Arthur waiting on the porch, Daisy at his feet. He stood as they pulled up, his eyes finding Camilla immediately. "How was shopping?" he asked, helping her with the bags. "Successful," Martha answered for her. "She'll be the prettiest one there, if you ask me." Arthur smiled, and Camilla didn't. Missed the way his eyes lingered on her. "I don't doubt it." Martha huffed and headed inside, leaving them alone on the porch. "Thank you," Camilla said, "for the dress and everything. I've never had anything so nice." "It's nothing," Arthur replied. "I want you to feel comfortable on Saturday." He hesitated. "There's something else I wanted to ask you about." "What is it?" He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture of nervousness. "I found one of your notes, the one in the kitchen about new beginnings." Camilla looked down, suddenly embarrassed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have left those around the house." "No, that's not—" Arthur stepped closer. "I liked it. It made me think about things differently." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. "I found this one by the front door, too." Camilla recognized it as the note she'd left that read, "Welcome home. No one has ever tried to make this place feel like a home before," Arthur said softly. "Not even me." The vulnerability in his voice made Camilla's heart ache. On impulse, she reached out and took his hand. "Everyone deserves a home." For a moment they stood there, hands joined, eyes locked. Then the sound of Martha calling from inside broke the spell. "You should go in," Arthur said, reluctantly releasing her hand. "I have some calls to make about Saturday." The days leading up to the dinner party were a flurry of activity. Fresh flowers were arranged throughout the house, silver was polished to a high shine, and the rarely used formal dining room was transformed with candles and fine china. Arthur insisted that Camilla oversee every detail, trusting her instincts more than the traditional protocols his mother had always followed. On the morning of the party, Camilla was checking the place settings when Joe, the groundskeeper, appeared in the doorway. "There's someone here to see you," he said, looking uncomfortable. A woman says her name is Mrs. Hawkins. Camila froze. Mrs. Hawkins, her former employer who had accused her of theft. Where is she? Camila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Out. Front? I told her to wait there. With trembling legs, Camila walked to the front entrance. There, standing on the porch, was Mrs. Hawkins, an elegantly dressed woman in her 50s, with perfectly styled grey hair and a face tight with disapproval. So it's true, Mrs. Hawkins said, as soon as she saw Camila. You've managed to worm your way into the Montgomery household. What are you doing here? Camila asked, careful to keep her distance. I received a call from Gregory Walsh, Mrs. Hawkins replied with a smug smile. He's an old friend of my husband's. He was quite interested to hear about the circumstances of your departure from my home. Cold fear washed over Camila. I didn't take your earrings, yet they disappeared the same day you did, Mrs. Hawkins countered. How convenient. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Mr. Walsh tells me you've caught Arthur Montgomery's eye, quite an achievement for a thief. How you should leave, Camila said, struggling to keep her voice steady. Oh, I will, but not before I speak with Arthur. I believe I have a duty to warn him about the kind of person he's invited into his home. Before Camila could respond, a deep voice came from behind her. That won't be necessary, Mrs. Hawkins. Arthur stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. How long had he been there? How much had he heard? Arthur Montgomery, Mrs. Hawkins said, her tone suddenly honeyed. How good to see you again. It's been too long since the charity gala. What can I do for you? Arthur asked coolly. Mrs. Hawkins cast a pointed glance at Camila. I was hoping for a private word about your staff. Anything you have to say about Ms. Santos can be said in front of her, Arthur replied firmly. Mrs. Hawkins's smile tightened. Very well. I feel it's my duty to inform you that this young woman left my employment under a cloud of suspicion. My diamond earrings, a family heirloom, disappeared the same day she did. Arthur's expression didn't change. And did you file a police report? The question seemed to catch Mrs. Hawkins off guard. Well, no. I didn't want to cause a scandal. But, so you have no proof of these allegations, Arthur interrupted. Just suspicion. Sometimes a woman's intuition is all the proof needed. Mrs. Hawkins sniffed. I would hate to see the Montgomery family name tarnished by association with someone of questionable character. Arthur took a deliberate step forward, placing himself slightly in front of Camila. Mrs. Hawkins, I appreciate your concern, but I trust Camila implicitly, which is more than I can say for certain members of so-called good society. His voice hardened. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have preparations to make for this evening's event. Mrs. Hawkins' face flushed with anger. Gregory Walsh will hear about this. I'm counting on it, Arthur replied, holding the door open in clear dismissal. After Mrs. Hawkins had stalked back to her car and driven away, Arthur turned to Camila, who stood frozen in place, eyes wide with shock. Are you all right? He asked gently. You defended me, she said, still processing what had just happened. Of course I did. He guided her to a bench on the porch. Sit down for a minute. Camila sank onto the bench, her knees suddenly weak. Everything she said about the earrings, it wasn't true. I never took them. I know, Arthur said simply, sitting beside her. How can you be so sure? He looked at her, his gaze steady. Because I know you, Camila. I've watched you treat this house with more care and respect than anyone ever has. I've seen your kindness to Daisy, to Martha, even to grumpy old Joe. Those aren't the actions of a thief. Tears pricked at Camila's eyes. No one had ever shown such faith in her before. Thank you, she whispered. Arthur reached out and gently wiped away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. No one is going to hurt you again. Not while I'm here. The moment was intimate, charged with emotion that neither of them were ready to name. Finally, Arthur stood up. I should let you get back to your preparations, he said. But Camila, I meant what I said. I trust you. Don't let Mrs. Hawkins or anyone else make you doubt your place here. As he walked back into the house, Camila touched her cheek where his fingers had been, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. Hours later, as guests began to arrive for the dinner party, Camila stood in her room, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The blue dress from the boutique transformed her in ways she hadn't expected. Her dark hair was pinned up in a simple but elegant style, and the small pearl earrings Martha had lent her caught the light when she moved. A soft knock on her door broke her reverie. It was Martha, dressed in her formal serving clothes. "You look beautiful," the older woman said, genuine warmth in her voice. "But you're going to be late. The guests are all downstairs already." Camila took a deep breath. "Do you think I'm making a mistake? Being there as a guest instead of serving?" Martha's expression softened. "After what happened with Mrs. Hawkins today? No. Arthur made his choice clear to everyone. Now it's your turn to decide if you're brave enough to walk into that room." Gathering her courage, Camila followed Martha downstairs. At the entrance to the living room, she paused, taking in the scene before her. About 20 people stood in small groups, dressed in expensive clothes, crystal glasses in their hands. Their laughter and conversation created a wall of sound that momentarily overwhelmed her. Then she saw Arthur. He was standing near the fireplace, nodding politely at something an older gentleman was saying. As if sensing her presence, he looked up, and their eyes met across the room. His whole face changed, softening, lighting up with a smile that was meant only for her. Excusing himself, Arthur made his way through the crowd to where Camila stood. "You came," he said, relief evident in his voice. "I said I would," she replied, softly. "You look—" He seemed at a loss for words. "Stunning." Before she could respond, a woman's voice called out from behind Arthur. "Arthur, darling, you've been hiding from me all evening." A tall, elegant blonde woman approached them, her red dress clinging to every curve. She kissed Arthur on both cheeks before turning her gaze to Camila. "And who is this?" she asked, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Caroline, this is Camila Santos," Arthur said, a slight tension in his voice. "Camila, this is Caroline Winters, an old family friend." Camila felt a jolt of recognition at the name. Caroline Winters, the woman Helen Montgomery had wanted Arthur to marry. "Santos," Caroline repeated as if tasting the name. "I don't believe I know any Santos family in the county." "Camila just moved here recently," Arthur explained smoothly. Caroline's eyes narrowed slightly. "How interesting. And what brings you to our little corner of the world, Camila?" Before she could answer, Arthur placed a protective hand on the small of Camila's back. "Camila has been instrumental in bringing Monte Azul back to life. I don't know what I would have done without her." The intimacy of his touch and the warmth in his voice were not lost on Caroline. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "How wonderful. Arthur has always been so charitable." The subtle insult hung in the air between them. Camila felt her cheeks burn, but Arthur's hand on her back steadied her. "Actually," he said, his voice carrying a hint of steel, "Camila has taught me more about genuine care for a home and the people in it than anyone I've ever known. There's nothing charitable about recognizing true value when you see it." Caroline's perfect composure slipped for just a moment before she recovered with a practiced laugh. "Always the romantic, Arthur. Do bring your friend to say hello to everyone else. People are dying to meet her." As Caroline sauntered away, Camila let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "I think she wanted to kill me with her eyes," Arthur chuckled. "Caroline has always believed she had a claim on me. My mother encouraged it." "She's the one from your mother's journal," Camila said without thinking, then immediately regretted it when Arthur's eyes widened in surprise. "You've read my mother's journal?" he asked quietly. Camila felt a wash of shame. "I found it while cleaning. I only read a few pages, I swear. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have—" "It's all right," Arthur interrupted, though his expression had grown more serious. "I suppose you know, then, about the conditions of my inheritance," she nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "That you need to marry someone your mother would approve of." Arthur's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "My mother tried to control my life while she was alive. I won't let her control it from the grave." Before Camila could respond, they were approached by an older couple, and Arthur smoothly introduced her as the woman who's brought Monte Azul back to life. For the next hour, he kept her by his side as they moved through the room, his hand rarely leaving the small of her back. Some guests were politely curious about her, while others barely concealed their scrutiny. Throughout it all, Camila was acutely aware of Caroline Winters watching them, her perfect smile never wavering even as her eyes followed their every move. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, with Camila seated at Arthur's right hand, a position that clearly surprised many of the guests. The table was beautiful, with arrangements of flowers from the greenhouse creating a riot of color down its center. As conversations flowed around her, Camila began to relax slightly, even contributing to discussions about the farm's renovations. "Arthur, tells us you've worked wonders with Helen's old greenhouse," said an elderly woman seated nearby. "I never thought I'd see those flowers bloom again." "It just needed some care and patience," Camila replied modestly. "Rather like Arthur himself," the woman said with a knowing smile that made Camila blush. From further down the table, Caroline's voice cut through the conversation. "I must say, Arthur, it's refreshing to see Monte Azul with a woman's touch again. Though I always imagined the next woman to take on that role would be someone—" "Someone what, Caroline?" Arthur asked, an edge to his voice. Caroline smiled sweetly. "Someone more familiar with the Montgomery legacy, of course. Helen had such specific visions for this place." "Helen's vision nearly destroyed this house," Arthur replied coolly. "And almost me along with it." A hush fell over the table at his words. Arthur rarely spoke so openly about his mother, especially in mixed company. An older man, who Camila recognized as Gregory Walsh, cleared his throat. "Speaking of Helen's vision, Arthur, have you given any more thought to our discussion about the foundation board?" "This isn't the time or place for business, Gregory," Arthur said firmly. "On the contrary," Walsh pressed, "many of the board members are here tonight. It would be the perfect opportunity to announce your decision to take a more active role, as per the terms of your mother's will." Camila felt Arthur tense beside her. His hand, resting on the table, curled into a tight fist. "My decision," Arthur said slowly, "is that I will run Monte Azul as I see fit. If that doesn't align with my mother's wishes or the board's expectations, they're welcome to challenge me in court." Walsh's face darkened. "Need I remind you of the consequences? Your mother was very clear about what would happen if you failed to fulfill your obligations." "You mean if I failed to marry someone she approved of and live the life she planned?" "For me?" Arthur's voice was quiet but intense. "Yes, Gregory, I'm well aware of the consequences. I could lose everything." A shocked murmur ran around the table. Many of the guests had not been privy to the specific conditions of Helen Montgomery's will. Caroline laughed nervously. "Arthur, darling, this is hardly dinner conversation." But Arthur wasn't finished. His eyes locked with Walsh's across the table. "What my mother never understood, what you still don't understand, is that some things are more important than money or status or family names." Under the table, Camila felt Arthur's hand find hers, squeezing it gently. "The will is quite clear, Arthur," Walsh said, his voice hardening. "If you don't comply with the terms, the entire estate passes to the foundation. You'll be left with nothing." "Not nothing," Arthur replied, and something in his tone made Camila look up at him. His eyes were no longer on Walsh, but on her, filled with an emotion she was afraid to name. Far from nothing. The tension in the room was broken by Martha's entrance with dessert. Conversation gradually resumed, though Camila noticed several guests casting curious glances between her and Arthur, clearly trying to piece together what was happening. After dinner, as guests moved to the living room for coffee, Caroline cornered Camila in the hallway. "You've made quite an impression," she said, her smile cold. "Arthur seems quite taken with you." "He's been very kind to me," Camila replied cautiously. Caroline laughed softly. "Oh, I'm sure he has. Arthur has always had a soft spot for, how shall I put it? Charity cases." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "But you should know something, dear. Arthur may be infatuated now, but men like him don't marry girls like you. Not when there's a fortune at stake." The word stung, but Camila refused to show it. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I think you are," Caroline said, her perfect veneer slipping slightly. "I've known Arthur since we were children. Our families have been intertwined for generations. You? You're a momentary distraction, his little rebellion against his mother's memory." She smoothed her already flawless hair. He'll tire of you eventually. They always do. Before Camila could respond, Arthur appeared in the hallway, his expression darkening when he saw them together. "Is everything all right?" he asked, moving to Camila's side. "Just girl talk," Caroline said brightly, touching his arm in a familiar gesture. "I was just telling Camila how delightful it is to see Monte Azul coming back to life." With a final pointed look at Camila, she glided back to join the other guests. "What did she say to you?" Arthur asked once they were alone. Camila hesitated, not wanting to create more drama. "Nothing important." Arthur looked unconvinced but didn't press further. "Are you enjoying yourself at all? I know these people can be overwhelming." "It's been educational," Camila admitted with a small smile. "Your friends are exactly what I expected." "They're not my friends," Arthur corrected. "They're my mother's friends, my family's business associates, the people she believed were important." He took her hand, pulling her gently toward a side door. "Come on, I need some air." They slipped outside onto a small terrace, the cool night. Air a welcome relief after the stuffiness of the house. The moon was full, casting silver light over the gardens Camila had so carefully tended. "I'm sorry about what happened at dinner," Arthur said after a moment. "Walsh had no right to bring up my mother's will like that." "Now everyone knows," Camila said quietly, "about the conditions of your inheritance." Arthur leaned against the stone balustrade, looking out over the moonlit landscape. "Let them know I'm tired of secrets. What will happen if you don't do what your mother wanted?" He glanced at her, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "Everything goes to the foundation, the house, the business, all of it. And that doesn't scare you?" Camila asked, genuinely puzzled. She had grown up with nothing. She couldn't imagine giving up such wealth willingly. "It used to," Arthur admitted. "For years after my mother died, I tried to live as she wanted, focusing on the business, attending the right social events, even dating women she would have approved of." He turned to face Camila fully. "But I was miserable, and the house was dying, just like I was." Camila stepped closer, drawn by the raw honesty in his voice. "Then you arrived," Arthur continued softly, "with your quiet strength and your little notes about new beginnings. And for the first time in years, I started to feel alive." He reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Do you know what I realized, Camila? A house isn't a home without love in it, and all the money in the world can't buy that." The word love hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Camilla's heart raced as Arthur's hand lingered against her cheek. "Your mother wanted what she thought was best for you," she whispered. "She wanted what was best for the Montgomery name," Arthur corrected. "Not for me." Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Arthur leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, but when Camila responded, he deepened the kiss, one hand cradling her face while the other pulled her closer. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Arthur rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the first dinner we shared," he admitted. Camila's mind was spinning. This couldn't be real. The handsome, wealthy owner of Monte Azul farm kissing her, a housekeeper with no family and no prospects. It was like something from a dream. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Before Arthur could answer, the terrace door opened behind them, spilling light onto the stone floor. They quickly stepped apart as Gregory Walsh emerged, his thin face tight with disapproval. "So it's true," he said coldly. "Helen warned me this might happen one day, you throwing everything away for some inappropriate infatuation." Arthur's body tensed. "That's enough, Gregory." "No, I don't think it is," Walsh replied, his gaze shifting to Camila. "Do you even understand what you're doing, young woman? The Montgomery legacy spans generations. Arthur has responsibilities that go far beyond his personal desires." "My personal desires are none of your concern," Arthur said sharply. Walsh laughed humorlessly. "That's where you're wrong. As executor of your mother's estate, everything about you is my concern." He turned back to Camila. "Did he tell you about Sophia, the last girl he thought he was in love with?" Camila felt Arthur flinch beside her. "Gregory, stop," he warned, but Walsh continued relentlessly. Helen paid her to leave town, quite generously, I might add. The girl took the money without a second thought. His cold eyes assessed Camila. I wonder what your price would be. Arthur stepped forward, his hands clenched at his sides. Get out now. The guests, Walsh began, can find their own way out, Arthur finished. You're no longer welcome in my home. For a tense moment, the two men stared at each other, then Walsh smiled thinly. Very well, but remember, you have until your 31st birthday to fulfill the terms of the will. That's barely a month away. He glanced at Camila again. Choose wisely, Arthur. After Walsh had gone, silence fell between them. Camila felt cold despite the warm evening, Walsh's words echoing in her mind. Is it true? She finally asked. About the other girl, Sophia? Arthur closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. Yes, we were in love. Or at least I thought we were. She left without explanation, and I never knew why until after my mother died. Walsh showed me the receipts. The hurt in his voice made Camilla's chest ache. No wonder he had trust issues, why he had spent so much time running from this place. I would never take money to leave, she said softly. Not for any amount. Arthur looked at her, vulnerability clear in his eyes. I believe you. But you should know what you're getting into, Camila. Walsh won't stop. My mother's friends won't understand. There will be talk, rumors. I've dealt with worse, she interrupted. The question is, are you willing to risk everything? Your inheritance, your position, all of it? For a long moment, Arthur didn't answer. He looked out at the farm, at the fields stretching into the darkness, at the house his family had built generations ago. Then his gaze returned to her face, and the intensity in his eyes took her breath away. For the right person, he said quietly, I'd risk it all. Inside the house, they could hear guests beginning to leave, their voices drifting through the open doors. The dinner party was ending, but Camila sensed that something else, something far more significant, was just beginning. As if reading her thoughts, Arthur took her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that felt both old-fashioned and incredibly intimate. Stay with me, he whispered against her skin. Not as my housekeeper, but as whatever this is becoming between us. It was both a question and a plea, and despite all the warnings, from Martha, from Walsh, from her own cautious heart, Camila found herself nodding. I'll stay, she promised. The smile that broke across Arthur's face was like the sun coming out after a storm, brilliant and full of hope. He pulled her close again, this kiss deeper and more certain than the first. Neither of them noticed Caroline Winters watching from the shadows of the terrace doors, her perfect features twisted with jealousy and determination. The days following, the dinner party brought a distinct change to Monte Azul Farm. For one thing, Arthur no longer pretended that Camila was just an employee. They took their meals together in the dining room, walked the property hand in hand, and spent evenings talking in the library until the small hours of the morning. The uncertainty between them had been replaced by something new and fragile, a cautious happiness neither quite believed they deserved. Martha observed this transformation with a mixture of concern and reluctant approval. Well, I can't say I've ever seen him smile so much, she commented one morning as she and Camila prepared breakfast. Just be careful, both of you. Gregory Walsh isn't the type to give up easily. Indeed, Walsh had been busy. 3 days after the dinner party, Arthur received a formal letter from the Montgomery Foundation Board, requesting his presence at an emergency meeting to discuss the future leadership of the family estate. They can't force you to do anything, can they? Camila asked as they sat in the garden, Arthur's face tight with anger after reading the letter. Not legally, he replied, but they can make things very difficult. The foundation controls a significant portion of the business interests, and the board members, all my mother's friends, have influence in social and financial circles. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. They could damage the Montgomery name, make it hard for me to do business in the future. Because of me, Camila said quietly. Arthur took her hands in his. No, because of my mother's controlling nature and her outdated ideas about social status. His eyes softened. Never blame yourself for other people's prejudice, Camila, but Camila couldn't help feeling responsible. She had seen the expressions on the guests' faces at the dinner party. had felt the judgment in their eyes when Arthur paid special attention to her. She knew what they were thinking, that she was a gold digger, an opportunist who had somehow bewitched the wealthy heir. These worries weighed on her mind as she went about her days. She still cleaned the house and tended the greenhouse despite Arthur's insistence that she didn't need to. Working with her hands gave her a sense of purpose and control when everything else felt uncertain. One afternoon, as Camila was arranging fresh flowers in the entrance hall, she heard a car approaching. Expecting Arthur, who had gone into town for a meeting, she went to the door with a smile. But it wasn't Arthur's sleek black car that pulled up. It was Caroline Winter's red convertible. Camilla's smile faded as Caroline stepped out, looking impeccable in a designer suit, her blonde hair gleaming in the sunlight. "Is Arthur home?" Caroline asked without preamble as she approached the door. "He's in town for a meeting," Camila replied, maintaining a polite tone despite the hostility radiating from the other woman. Caroline's perfect lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Good, because it's you I really want to talk to." Reluctantly, Camila invited her in, leading her to the sitting room. Martha appeared briefly in the doorway, raising an eyebrow at the unexpected visitor, but Camila gave a small nod to indicate she was fine. "Tea," Camila offered. "Let's not pretend this is a social call," Caroline said, setting her expensive handbag on the sofa beside her. "I think we both know that only one of us belongs in this house, and it isn't you." Camila took a deep breath, determined not to let Caroline intimidate her. "Arthur would disagree." "Arthur is confused," Caroline countered smoothly. "He's rebelling against his mother's memory, using you to do it. It's not personal, it's psychological." She leaned forward. "But the consequences will be very real for both of you." "What do you mean?" Caroline smiled, a predatory expression that made Camilla's skin crawl. "I've been talking with the foundation board. If Arthur fails to comply with the terms of Helens' will, which includes making an appropriate match, he'll lose everything. Not just the house and money, but his position in society, his business connections, everything that makes him who he is." "Arthur is more than his name or money," Camila replied, though her voice wavered slightly. "Is he?" Caroline raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. "Are you sure? Because the Arthur Montgomery I know has never lived without wealth or privilege. Do you really think he'll be happy with nothing? That he won't resent you when he realizes what he gave up?" The question struck at Camilla's deepest fears. She had wondered the same things herself during sleepless nights. "What do you want, Caroline?" she asked, cutting to the chase. "I want you to do the sensible thing. Leave." Caroline reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. Inside is a check for $100,000 and a letter of recommendation for a position at a hotel in San Francisco, far away from here. Camila stared at the envelope, feeling a mixture of shock and disgust. "You think you can buy me off?" "I think I'm offering you a dignified exit," Caroline corrected. "A fresh start somewhere else with enough money to build a good life. It's more than generous." "And if I refuse?" Caroline's expression hardened. "Then I'll make sure everyone knows about your theft accusation. I'll personally inform every potential employer in the state about your history. And I'll use my considerable influence with the foundation board to ensure Arthur loses everything." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "The choice is simple. Take the money and go, or stay and destroy Arthur's life." Setting the envelope on the coffee table, Caroline walked to the door, then turned back with one final shot. "Oh, and don't bother telling Arthur about this. Men hate drama, and he'll only resent you more for putting him in this position." With that, she left, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air like a toxic cloud. Camila sat motionless, staring at the envelope. The rational part of her knew she should tell Arthur immediately about Caroline's visit, but a smaller, darker voice whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Maybe Arthur would be better off without her, free to reconcile with his mother's wishes and claim his rightful inheritance. For hours she battled with herself. When Arthur returned home that evening, she tried to act normal, but he immediately sensed something was wrong. "What is it?" he asked as they sat down to dinner. "You've hardly said 2 words since I got back." Camila pushed her food around her plate. "Just tired," she lied. "How was your meeting?" Arthur didn't believe her, but didn't press further. They ate in silence, the tension between them a new and uncomfortable presence. That night, as Camilla lay in bed, no longer in the staff quarters, but in a guest room closer to Arthur's, she made her decision. She couldn't be the reason Arthur lost everything. She loved him too much for that. The realization hit her with stunning force. She loved him. Not just his kindness or his defense of her, but him, his quiet strength, his struggle against the life others had planned for him, the way he saw her when no one else did. And sometimes, loving someone meant letting them go. CT. Next morning, Camilla rose early. Arthur had mentioned plans to visit the neighboring farm about a water rights issue, so she knew she had a few hours. Moving quietly, she packed her few belongings into the same worn suitcase she had arrived with. She left the beautiful blue dress hanging in the closet. She couldn't bear to take anything that had been bought with Montgomery money. In the kitchen, she found Martha kneading bread dough with fierce concentration. "You're leaving," Martha said, without looking up. It wasn't a question. Camilla nodded, tears threatening to spill over. "It's better this way." Martha stopped her work, wiping her hands on her apron. "Better for who? Not for Arthur, that's for sure." "He stands to lose everything because of me," Camilla explained, her voice breaking. "His inheritance, his position." "And you think money matters more to him than you do?" Martha interrupted, shaking her head in disappointment. "Girl, I thought you knew him better than that." "I'm trying to protect him," Camilla insisted. Martha sighed heavily. "Running away isn't protection, it's fear. And Arthur's had enough people. Leave him without explanation." The words stung, but Camilla had made up her mind. "Will you tell him I'm sorry, that it's not his fault?" "Tell him yourself," Martha replied firmly. "He deserves that much at least." But Camilla couldn't face Arthur, couldn't bear to see the hurt and confusion in his eyes. She knew if he asked her to stay, she might not have the strength to refuse. Instead, she left a note on the kitchen table, a simple message that read, "I'm sorry. This is for the best. Thank you for seeing me." Then she placed the key to her room beside it and walked to the door, Daisy following at her heels. "Take care of him," she whispered to the old dog, kneeling to stroke her soft fur one last time. With one final look at the house that had briefly felt like home, Camilla walked down the long driveway toward the main road, planning to catch the bus that passed by every few hours. She had only made it halfway when the sound of a car coming up fast behind her made her turn. Arthur's black car skidded to a stop in a cloud of dust. He jumped out, his face a mixture of panic and anger. "What are you doing?" he demanded, striding toward her. "How did you know?" Camilla asked, stunned to see him. "Martha called me the second. You left the house," he explained. "What the hell is going on, Camilla? Why are you leaving like this?" She clutched her suitcase tighter. "It's better this way for both of us." "Better?" Arthur's voice cracked with disbelief. "How is this better? At least have the courage to tell me the truth." The pain in his eyes broke something inside her. "Caroline came to see me yesterday," Camilla admitted. "She offered me money to leave. She said if I stay, you'll lose everything. Your inheritance, your position, everything that makes you who you are." Understanding dawned on Arthur's face, followed quickly by fury. "And you believed her?" "She wasn't wrong. You will lose it all. Because of me." "Because of my choice," Arthur corrected firmly. "My choice, Camilla, not yours, not Caroline's, not my mother's, mine." He stepped closer, taking her free hand in his. "Do you think I care about money or status more than I care about you? About the way you make me feel? About the home we could build together?" Tears spilled down Camilla's cheeks. "I don't want you to regret choosing me. The only thing I would regret is letting you walk away," Arthur said softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "I was planning to give you this tonight, after dinner." Camilla stared at the box, her heart pounding. "What is it?" "Open it," he urged. With trembling fingers, Camilla set down her suitcase and took the box. Inside was a ring of keys, not just one but several strung together on a silver ring. "I don't understand," she said, looking up at him in confusion. Arthur took the ring of keys from the box. "This is the master key to the front door," he explained, pointing to an ornate iron key. "This one opens the greenhouse." He indicated a smaller brass key. "This is for the stables, this one for the garden gate, and this..." He held up a modern silver key. "This is to my private rooms, the parts of the house no one else has ever been allowed to enter." He closed her fingers around the keys. "I want you to have them all, not as my housekeeper, but as the woman I love, as the person who turned this empty building into a home for the first time in my life." Camila stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "What are you saying?" Arthur took a deep breath as if gathering his courage. "You arrived here to clean this house," he said, echoing the words from his note. "But you ended up cleaning my life. I can't let you go, not as an employee." He knelt down, still holding her hand with the keys. "I want you to stay as the owner of all this, and if you'll let me, as the owner of my heart too." The world seemed to stop. Here was Arthur Montgomery, wealthy, handsome, and able to have anyone he wanted, kneeling in the dirt of a country road, asking her, Camila Santos, to stay with him forever. "Arthur," she whispered, "the will, your inheritance—" "I don't care," he said firmly. "I'd rather have love in a shack than emptiness in a mansion. I've lived that life, Camila. I won't go back to it." "But—" "No buts," Arthur interrupted, rising to his feet. "Just yes or no. Do you love me enough to stay? To face whatever comes, together?" Camila looked down at the keys in her hand, symbols of trust, of belonging, of home. All the things she had sought her entire life. And now, they were being offered freely, along with Arthur's heart. "Yes," she said, her voice growing stronger with certainty. "Yes, I'll stay." The smile that broke across Arthur's face was like sunshine after a storm. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that felt like coming home. When he kissed her, it was a promise of love, of commitment, of a future built together. "Let's go home," he said when they finally broke apart. Hand in hand, they walked back toward the house, leaving the suitcase forgotten on the roadside. Daisy met them at the front gate, barking excitedly, as if she understood everything had worked. Out! Just as they reached the porch, another car came racing up the driveway. Gregory Walsh stepped out, his thin face flushed with anger. "Arthur, what is the meaning of this?" he demanded, waving a piece of paper. "I've just come from an emergency board meeting. Caroline Winters informed us that you're planning to defy the explicit terms of your mother's will." Arthur's arm tightened protectively around Camilla's waist. "That's correct, Gregory. I've made my decision." Walsh's face reddened further. "This is madness. You're throwing away your entire inheritance for... He gestured dismissively at Camila. "For love," Arthur finished calmly. "Something my mother never understood, and apparently neither do you." "Love?" Walsh scoffed. "You barely know this woman. What about your responsibility to the Montgomery name, to the legacy your family has built over generations?" Arthur's expression hardened. "My responsibility is to live an authentic life, not one dictated by outdated notions of social status. If that means losing the Montgomery fortune, so be it." "You can't be serious," Walsh sputtered. "Think of everything you're giving up." "I'm not giving up anything that matters," Arthur replied, looking at Camila with such tenderness that her heart swelled. "I'm gaining everything I need." Walsh stared at them, seemingly at a loss for words. Finally, he thrust the paper at Arthur. "This is the board's formal notice. You have until the end of the month, your 31st birthday, to comply with the terms of the will or forfeit everything." "I understand," Arthur said, taking the paper without looking at it. "Your mother would be ashamed," Walsh said, a final, desperate attempt to sway him. Arthur merely smiled. "Maybe. But for the first time in my life, I'm not ashamed of myself." He turned to Camila. "Shall we go inside? Our home is waiting." Without sparing Walsh another glance, they walked into the house together, leaving the lawyer standing alone on the driveway. In the entrance hall, Martha was waiting, a knowing smile on her face when she saw them together. "Glad to see you came. To your senses, girl," she said to Camila. "Both of you. Martha, I'd like to introduce you to the new mistress of Monte Azul Farm," Arthur announced, his voice filled with pride. "And my future wife, if she'll have me," Camila gasped, not expecting such a clear declaration. "Arthur, are you sure? You're giving up so much." "I'm gaining everything," he corrected, taking her hands in his. "Do you remember what you wrote in that note by the front door? Welcome home. That's what you've given me, Camilla. A home, not just a house filled with furniture and memories, but a real home filled with warmth and hope and love. Tears filled Camilla's eyes as she looked around the entrance hall, at the fresh flowers she had arranged that morning, at Martha's approving smile, at Daisy wagging her tail by their feet. This place that had once felt so imposing and empty now felt alive with possibility. So, Arthur said softly, "Will you marry me, Camila Santos? Will you help me build a new legacy here, one based on love instead of obligation?" "Yes," Camilla whispered, her heart so full she could barely speak. "Yes, I will." Arthur pulled her into his arms, sealing their promise with a kiss that felt like the beginning of everything. Martha discreetly retreated to the kitchen, wiping a suspicious moisture from her eyes. Daisy settled contentedly at their feet, as if she had known all along this was how things were meant to be. Outside, Walsh's car could be heard driving away, taking with it the last vestiges of Helen Montgomery's controlling influence. There would be challenges ahead: society gossip, financial adjustments, the disapproval of Arthur's former circle. But standing there in the entrance hall of Monte Azul Farm, keys in her hand and love in her heart, Camilla knew they would face it all, together. For an orphaned girl who had spent her life cleaning other people's homes, she had finally found her own, not just in the physical structure of Monte Azul, but in Arthur's heart. And as she looked up at the man who had chosen her above all else, she knew that no mansion, no fortune, no social position could compare to the richness of being truly seen, chosen, and loved. The keys in her hand weren't just to rooms and buildings, they were the key to a future where she belonged. A future where she was no longer invisible or disposable, but essential, necessary, loved. A month later, on Arthur's 31st birthday, they stood together on the porch of Monte Azul, watching as Gregory Walsh and 2 other board members approached the house. It was the deadline specified in Helen Montgomery's will, the day Arthur would officially forfeit his inheritance if he hadn't complied with his mother's wishes. Camilla squeezed his hand nervously. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Arthur smiled down at her, completely at peace. "I've never been more sure of anything." When Walsh reached them, he had a solemn expression. "Arthur Montgomery, as executor of your mother's estate, I am legally obligated to inform you that as of today, you are in violation of the terms of Helen Montgomery's will. According to the document, the entire estate, including this property, and all associated business interests, should now pass to the Montgomery Foundation." Arthur nodded calmly. "I understand." "However," Walsh continued, looking distinctly uncomfortable, "the board has voted to exercise the discretionary clause in Section 7 of the will." Arthur's brow furrowed in confusion. "What discretionary clause? I read the will front to back. There was no such clause." Walsh shifted awkwardly. "It was a private addendum, known only to me as executor. Helen included it, just in case." "In case of what?" Arthur demanded. "In case you found something she never did," Walsh admitted reluctantly. "True happiness." Camilla gasped softly beside Arthur, who looked equally stunned. "Your mother was a complex woman," Walsh explained. "Controlling. Yes, but she did love you in her way. This clause states that if you were to find genuine love and happiness, even if it didn't align with her specific plans, the board could vote to honor that choice." "And they voted to do so?" Arthur asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Walsh nodded. "Unanimously, even Caroline Winters in the end." "Why?" Camilla couldn't help asking. "After everything you all did to try to separate us?" "Because anyone who sees you together can recognize what you have is real," Walsh said simply. "And because this farm has never looked better, the business has never been more innovative than under Arthur's recent direction, and," he gestured, "to the flourishing gardens and the house now warm and inviting. Helen wanted Monte Azul to thrive. It clearly is." He handed Arthur an envelope. "This contains the board's official recognition of you as the rightful heir to the Montgomery estate, with no further conditions. What you choose to do with it now is entirely up to you." As Walsh and the board members departed, Arthur and Camilla stood in stunned silence. "I can't believe it," Arthur finally said. "After everything, my mother actually understood." "Maybe she knew you better than you thought," Camila suggested gently. Arthur looked down at the envelope in his hand. Then, at the woman beside him, the woman who had arrived with nothing but a worn suitcase and had given him everything that mattered. "None of this changes anything," he said firmly. "I would have chosen you even without the inheritance. I want you to know that." "I do know that," Camila assured him, reaching up to touch his face. "That's why I love you." Arthur smiled, pulling her close. "So, future Mrs. Montgomery, what shall we do with our home now?" Camila looked at the sprawling farm, seeing not just what it was, but what it could become. "Let's make it a place of welcome," she suggested. "A true home, not just for us, but for others who need one." As they stood together on the porch of Monte Azul Farm, the key ring safely in Camila's pocket, they both knew they had found something rare and precious. Not just a house or an inheritance, but a place where they both truly belonged. For Camila, who had spent her life cleaning other people's homes while longing for her own, and for Arthur, who had lived in a beautiful house that had never felt like home. They had finally found what they were looking for, in each other. And the key that he had given her had unlocked not just doors, but hearts, healing wounds that both had carried for far too long. Together they would build a life filled with the love, acceptance, and belonging they had both always craved. Inside the house, Daisy barked, as if calling them home. Hand in hand, they walked through the door, ready to begin the rest of their lives together. The end.